Today we are diving into one of the shortest, but maybe one of the most pivotal books in the Book of Mormon, the Book of Omni. Seriously, it's this tiny little bridge in a massive narrative, but it's just packed with centuries of history, a crazy escape, and the story of two completely different cultures colliding. Let's see how this short book pulls it all together.
I want you to imagine for a second that history wasn't some dry textbook, but a relay race. And there's this precious baton, right? It holds the identity, the faith, the entire future of a people, and it's being passed carefully from one generation to the next. Well, that's exactly what the Book of Omni is. It's a generational handoff, where dropping that baton could mean the end of everything.
So, the first part of the book introduces us to the runners in this race. And this is a total family affair, a sacred record passed down over centuries from one man to the next. Each one just adds a few lines, before their time is up.
Okay, the sheer amount of time that passes in just a few verses is staggering. We start with Omni, and he's writing 282 years after his people left Jerusalem. By the time his son Amaron takes over, it's been 320 years. These entries are so brief, but they span entire lifetimes. It really highlights what a long and difficult duty it was to be the keepers of this flame.
So the first runner, Omni, he gets straight to the point. His life boiled down to two things: fighting their sworn enemies, the Lamanites, just to survive, and making sure this record got passed on. For him, life was all about preservation of his people and of their history.
Next up, the baton goes to his son, Amaron, and his entry, whoa, it takes a really dark turn. He records that a huge chunk of his own people, the Nephites, were destroyed because of their wickedness. It's this stark reminder of divine judgment. And after seeing all that, he passes the plates not to his son, but to his brother, Chemish.
Chemish's part is, well, it's fascinatingly brief. It's almost nothing. But his one crucial sentence tells you everything you need to know about their mission. After this manner, we keep the records, for it is according to the commandments of our fathers. He's just a link in the chain, He's driven purely by this solemn duty to the past. And the last of this first group is Abinadom. He keeps the theme going. More war, more fighting with the sword. But then he adds this really interesting detail. I know of no revelation save that which has been written. It just paints this picture of spiritual silence, right? A time of just holding on, where the only guidance they had came from the words of the past.
And that feeling of just holding on, that feeling of purest survival, that wasn't just a passing phase. It was the dominant theme of their time. It was this relentless, exhausting cycle.
Their entire existence was just this constant, violent back and forth between these brief seasons of peace and then these long, brutal seasons of serious war and bloodshed. This was not a stable society. This was a civilization living on a knife's edge, where any moment of calm could be shattered in an instant. But just when the story feels like it's stuck on repeat, everything changes. The baton gets passed to one final writer, a man named Amaleki, and the scope of their world is about to get a whole lot bigger.
So Amaleki tells us about this righteous prophet king named Mosiah. He's warned by God to flee. So Mosiah gathers up anyone who will listen and leads them on this desperate escape into the wilderness. They aren't guided by a map or anything. They're guided by divine power, and they eventually stumble into this completely unknown land of Zarahemla.
And this discovery, this is the real climax of the journey, because what Mosiah finds in Zarahemla is going to change the course of Nephite history forever.
And what he finds there raises this massive question, one that's relevant to any culture at any time. What actually happens when a people loses its connection to its past? What happens when their written history just disappears? The contrast between the two groups was just wow. Mosiah's people had their records, the plates of brass, which kept their language and their faith totally intact. But the people of Zarahemla, they had brought no records with them. And the result was devastating. Their language had gotten so corrupted that they couldn't even be understood, and they had even come to deny the being of their creator. The consequences of losing their story were absolutely catastrophic.
So what was the solution? It was simple, and it was powerful. Mosiah taught them his language, and by sharing the history in his records, he basically gave them back their identity. The two peoples united, and they chose Mosiah, the man who brought them their history, to be their king. The written word literally rebuilt a nation. And then there's one more layer of mystery here.
They find this large stone with engravings telling of an even older civilization that was completely wiped out, a people who came from the Tower of Babel, whose language was scrambled by God way back at the dawn of time. It just adds this incredible sense of deep, ancient history and tragedy to their world.
So this brings us to the end of the relay race. Amaleki, our final narrator, has preserved this incredible story, and now he has to make one last crucial decision about the future of these plates.
Amaleki basically finds himself at a crossroads. He's getting old, and he has no children. The family relay has to end with him. So he breaks tradition. He knows King Benjamin is a good and just man, so Amaleki hands the sacred plates over to him, entrusting the record not to his own family, but to the royal line for safekeeping.
And with his very last words, Amaleki reveals the ultimate purpose of this whole centuries-long relay race. It wasn't just about history or who was related to who. His final plea is for every single person who will ever read this to come unto Christ. For him, every word, every battle, every single handoff was meant to lead to this one point: salvation.
So that leaves us with this thought. We've just seen a culture whose entire survival hinged on a single book, passed from hand to hand through centuries of conflict. It really makes you think. If your culture's survival depended on a single book, what would you make absolutely sure was written inside?